April 18, 1945. Western Germany. The war was almost over. At least, that's what everyone kept saying. Yet standing beside the muddy banks of the Rhine River, it didn't feel over. Not even close. A cold rain had fallen through most of the night, turning roads into rivers of brown sludge. American trucks struggled through the mud. Engines growled. Tires spun. Soldiers shouted instructions above the noise. The air smelled of wet earth, diesel fuel, and smoke. Smoke was everywhere. It drifted across the countryside from ruined towns and bombed factories that still smoldered weeks after Allied air raids. The landscape looked exhausted. Much like the people. Thousands of German prisoners and displaced civilians had gathered in temporary camps across the region. Some had walked for weeks. Others had fled advancing armies. Many carried little more than the clothes on their backs. Nobody knew exactly what the future would look like. They only knew the old world was gone. Near one of these camps stood a line of German women waiting for food. Their coats were worn. Their shoes were damaged. Many looked older than they really were. War had a way of doing that. American soldiers moved along the line distributing bread, coffee, and medical supplies. For most prisoners, food was the only thing that mattered. After years of shortages, even a simple piece of bread felt valuable. Yet one woman barely seemed to notice the food. She stood quietly near the back. Thin, pale, motionless. Perhaps 25 years old. Rainwater dripped from her dark coat. Her face revealed little emotion. But one American soldier noticed something strange. She never removed her right hand from beneath her coat. Not once. At first, he assumed she was cold. Everyone was cold. The damp wind cut through clothing and settled into bones. But after several minutes, he began noticing something else. Whenever another prisoner accidentally brushed against her, she flinched. Not slightly. Violently. As though even the lightest touch caused pain. The soldier watched carefully. Again. And again. Each time the same reaction. A sudden wince. A tightening of the jaw. A brief flash of suffering across her face. Then she would quickly hide it. As if she didn't want anyone to know. The soldier frowned. He had seen wounded men before. Thousands of them. Broken bones. Burns. Shrapnel wounds. Gunshot injuries. The war had shown him more suffering than he thought possible. Yet something about this woman felt different. She wasn't bleeding. She wasn't limping. There was no obvious injury. And yet she looked like someone carrying a secret. Eventually curiosity overcame him. He stepped closer. The woman lowered her eyes immediately. Many German prisoners still feared American soldiers. For years Nazi propaganda had painted terrifying pictures of what capture might mean. Some prisoners expected beatings. Others expected revenge. A few believed they would never leave captivity alive. The soldier spoke gently. "Are you all right?" The woman hesitated. For a moment she didn't answer. Rain tapped softly against nearby tents. A truck engine rumbled somewhere in the distance. The line continued moving. Still she said nothing. Then, finally, she looked up. The soldier noticed how exhausted she seemed. Not simply tired. Defeated. Like someone who had been carrying the weight of the world for far too long. He repeated the question. This time she slowly nodded. But the answer felt unconvincing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Then another woman in line accidentally bumped into her shoulder. The reaction was immediate. She gasped. A sharp intake of breath. Pain crossed her face. For a split second, she looked as though she had touched a hot stove. The American soldier stared. That wasn't normal. Not at all. He stepped forward. "You're hurt." Again she hesitated. Then she slowly revealed her hand. What he saw surprised him. The skin looked swollen. The fingers appeared stiff. The hand itself seemed strangely discolored. It wasn't a fresh wound. Whatever had happened long ago. Yet it clearly hadn't healed. The soldier examined it more closely. The injury looked serious. But what happened next confused him even more. He gently pointed toward one finger. Without touching her. Without applying pressure. Without causing any visible contact. The woman immediately pulled back. Her eyes widened. And then she whispered 5 words that he would never forget. "It burns when you touch it." The soldier looked down at the hand again. Burns. There were no burns. No fresh damage. No visible explanation for such intense pain. Yet the fear in her voice was real. Very real. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't seeking sympathy. She genuinely believed something inside her hand was burning. For months she had hidden the injury. For months she had told nobody. Not doctors. Not officials. Not even many of the people traveling beside her. She had simply endured the pain. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. Now the war was ending. And for the first time, someone had noticed. Within hours, American medical personnel would begin examining the injury. What they discovered would surprise everyone involved. The damage ran deeper than anyone expected. But the real mystery wasn't the injury itself. The real mystery was how she had survived with it for so long. How had a young German woman carried such pain through the final years of the Second World War? How had she endured bombing raids, food shortages, evacuation, the collapse of an entire nation? And why had she remained silent when help might have been available? The answers lay hidden in the years before that rainy morning. Back when Germany still believed victory was possible. Back when factories roared day and night. Back when millions of ordinary civilians were being pulled into a conflict larger than anything they could imagine. Because the story of this injury wasn't really about a hand. It was about survival. It was about fear. And it was about a lesson neither the American soldier nor the German woman would ever forget. A lesson that emerged from the ruins of a world at war. And as doctors prepared to examine her hand, neither of them could have known that the most surprising discovery was still ahead. To understand what happened next, we must return several years earlier. Back to a Germany that was beginning to crack beneath the pressure of war. Back to the day a seemingly ordinary accident changed one woman's life forever. 3 years earlier. In 1942, Germany was still fighting a war that seemed endless. 4 million of civilians. Daily life revolved around work, ration cards, and uncertainty. Among them was a young woman named Anna. She lived in an industrial town where factory chimneys dominated the skyline. Every morning before sunrise, workers poured through factory gates while whistles echoed across the streets. The smell of coal smoke filled the air. The war touched everything. Food, transportation, family life. Nothing remained untouched. Like many German women, Anna spent long hours working in a factory supporting the war effort. The work was repetitive and exhausting. Metal parts, heavy machinery, constant noise. Workers often spent 10 or 12 hours surrounded by rattling equipment and hot steel. Mistakes could be dangerous. One November afternoon, danger arrived without warning. A mechanical component suddenly slipped during production. Someone shouted. Workers turned. Then came a sharp scream. Anna's right hand became trapped in machinery. Co-workers rushed forward. The machine was stopped. Her hand was freed. But the damage had already been done. The pain was immediate. Blinding. The factory medic bandaged the injury and sent her for treatment. At first, doctors believed she would recover. Nothing suggested the injury would become something far worse. The cuts healed. The bruises faded. The swelling decreased. But the pain remained. Months passed. Then something strange happened. The slightest touch began causing intense burning sensations. A shirt sleeve brushing against her skin. A handshake. A light tap on the arm. Each felt like fire. Doctors struggled to explain it. Hospitals throughout Germany were becoming overwhelmed by wartime casualties. Resources were limited. Civilian injuries rarely received extensive attention. Anna was told to rest. To wait. To be patient. But the condition only worsened. Eventually she stopped talking about it. Few people understood. The injury looked minor. The pain felt unbearable. So she learned to hide it. And while she was fighting her own private battle, Germany itself was beginning to change. By 1943, Allied bombing campaigns intensified dramatically. Air raid sirens became part of daily life. Their rising wail echoed through towns and cities. Whenever the sirens sounded, workers abandoned machines and rushed toward shelters. Anna remembered the fear. The crowded underground rooms. The smell of dust and damp concrete. The nervous silence. Then the distant hum of aircraft. At first faint. Then growing louder. Hundreds of engines crossing the sky. Soon the bombs followed. Explosions shook walls. Lights flickered. Children cried. Some people prayed. Others simply waited. No one knew where the next bomb would fall. Entire neighborhoods disappeared overnight. Factories were damaged. Rail lines were destroyed. Cities that once bustled with life became landscapes of rubble. The war was no longer something happening elsewhere. It was happening outside their windows. And through it all, Anna carried her hidden injury. The stress seemed to make it worse. Fear intensified the burning sensation. Exhaustion amplified the pain. Some nights she slept only a few hours. Not because of bombing raids. Because every movement reminded her of the injury. Still, she continued working. There was little alternative. Everyone was struggling. Everyone was sacrificing. Food shortages became increasingly severe. Ration portions shrank. Fresh meat became rare. Coffee disappeared. Many families survived on thin soups, bread, and potatoes. Workers often stood in long lines hoping supplies had not run out. Hunger became a constant companion. By 1944, Germany's situation was deteriorating rapidly. News from the front grew worse. Bombing intensified. Entire cities were devastated. Millions of civilians lived under constant pressure. Anna noticed the changes everywhere. More wounded soldiers returned home. More families received tragic news. More buildings stood empty. The optimism that had once existed was fading. In its place came uncertainty. Then came the winter of 1944. One of the most difficult periods of the war. Temperatures dropped. Fuel shortages left homes cold. Transportation systems struggled. And rumors spread constantly. The Allies were advancing. The front lines were moving closer. People began preparing for the possibility that everything might change. They were right. In early 1945, Germany's collapse accelerated. Roads filled with refugees. Families packed whatever possessions they could carry. Carts rolled through muddy streets. Children walked beside exhausted parents. The sounds of war seemed to come from every direction. Anna eventually joined the growing stream of civilians moving westward. The journey was miserable. Cold rain. Frozen roads. Little food. Little sleep. Every day brought new uncertainty. Some nights she slept in barns. Other nights in overcrowded shelters. Many people she met had lost homes. Some had lost relatives. Others had lost everything. The war had reduced countless lives to a simple goal. Survive another day. Throughout the journey, Anna rarely mentioned her injury. Compared to everything else happening around her, it seemed insignificant. Yet the pain never disappeared. The burning sensation remained. Every mile. Every step. Every difficult day. Then came the moment she had feared for years. The arrival of American forces. German propaganda had spent years portraying enemy soldiers as monsters. Many civilians expected harsh treatment. Some expected revenge. Others feared imprisonment. As American troops entered the region, anxiety spread quickly among civilians. Nobody knew what would happen next. What happened surprised many of them. Instead of violence, they encountered organization. Processing stations. Food distribution points. Medical examinations. Temporary shelters. The situation remained difficult. The war had created enormous chaos. But reality differed greatly from what many had expected. Anna eventually arrived at a temporary processing camp near the Rhine River. By then she was exhausted. Physically. Emotionally. Mentally. Years of stress had taken their toll. Yet she still kept her injury hidden. Old habits die hard. She had concealed it for so long that remaining silent felt natural. Then came the rainy morning that changed everything. Standing in line for food, she accidentally drew the attention of an American soldier. At first he noticed only her discomfort. Then he observed her reactions whenever someone brushed against her. The pain was obvious. Eventually he approached. When she reluctantly revealed her hand, he immediately realized something was wrong. Medical personnel were called. For the first time in years, the injury received a thorough examination. Doctors studied the hand carefully. What they discovered surprised. Imagine a future not defined by pain. The American soldier who had first noticed her condition occasionally checked on her progress. Their conversations remained brief. Language barriers limited communication. Yet mutual respect slowly developed. It was a remarkable situation. Only months earlier, they had stood on opposite sides of a brutal war. Now one was helping the other recover. That small human connection reflected something larger happening across Europe. The war had encouraged people to see enemies. Yet individual encounters often revealed a more complicated reality. Beneath uniforms and nationalities were ordinary people carrying their own burdens, their own fears, their own wounds, some visible, others hidden. For Anna, The injury that had once seemed impossible to escape was finally beginning to heal. Not completely. Perhaps never completely. But enough to restore hope. And after years of war, hope was something few people took for granted. Although the original injury had occurred years earlier, significant nerve damage appeared to remain. The burning sensation she described was real. The pain was not imagined. It was not exaggerated. There was a medical explanation. For Anna, the diagnosis brought an unexpected emotion. Relief. For years she had questioned herself. Wondered whether others thought she was exaggerating. Wondered whether the pain existed only in her mind. Now doctors confirmed what she had known all along. Something genuinely was wrong. Treatment began almost immediately. The process was slow. There was no miracle cure. Years of damage could not be erased overnight. But improvements gradually appeared. The constant burning sensation began decreasing. Movement improved. Daily tasks became easier. For the first time in a long while, she could imagine. The conflict had stolen homes, families, dreams, entire futures. Yet in the final weeks of destruction, a simple act of attention changed one woman's life. An American soldier noticed what everyone else had overlooked. A hidden injury, a hidden struggle, and a hidden story that might otherwise have disappeared into the ruins of history.